Hey everyone, I wanted to take a moment and show you how I got the bearing out of this gear assembly here. I believe this is the drive gear shaft. So this bearing in here, it does slide a little bit, but at least none of the pullers I had were small enough to reach in and pull this out. So I'm going to try and show this while having one hand on the camera. So I took just one of the puller arms from my puller and I inserted it so that it was grabbing underneath. If I can get it in there. Okay. And then since my puller has multiple holes on the side, I inserted a longer bolt in the one hole. So it's like so. And then what I did was I used a screwdriver. Let's see, I got one here somewhere. And I basically pulled up on each side. I had two screwdrivers at one time. You may need someone to help you hold it because it gets kind of wobbly. But I used two screwdrivers then to pry up on each side of that screw, and that actually got it out. As I came up, I had to switch the bolt to the top hole, and then eventually I think one of these legs is longer than the other, as you can see, so I had to flip it upside down and keep prying it until it finally came out. But wanted to show you guys that because that kind of took me a while to figure out how in the world I was going to get that out. I tried to use hydraulic pressure by filling it with grease and inserting a bar and pounding it to use a hydraulic pressure to press it out, but that didn't work. So came up with this idea, and it actually worked like a charm. So just wanted to pass that along. If you got any questions or if that wasn't clear enough, let me know. Hello everyone, back here working on my John Deere B. I wanted to show you guys before I installed this, working on installing this. I believe they call this the drive shaft, one of them. This bearing, this is kind of what I was waiting on to install this. Kind of a unique bearing because it's got that snap ring in it. There you can see the part numbers if you guys need to order that. Make sure it has the snap ring on it. So yeah, we'll get this installed. Alright, so you can see we got this bearing tapped in. It comes in from the right side of the tractor here, and that snap ring sits against the outside. Something I wanted to point out, this was not the original that went in the tractor. I got this from someone else because when I was taking this out, you know, the manual says use a rubber hammer. Oh, okay. I'll make it come out, and I used a sledge, you know, not too hard on it, but it was enough that I split the nut and I boogered this up. Well, that's fixable, but then this coil here, sort of thread looking thing, didn't look that great either. Didn't really understand its purpose at the time, so I just went ahead and got a new one. Well, it turns out this piece on here is a separate piece that can come off, and you can get a new one. I forget what I saw it for online, 15, 20 bucks, something like that. But I just wanted to point that out. It is, I think it's like an oil slinger. I think oil comes through here and then it throws oil all over. But don't quote me on that. You guys can tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. So yeah, keep moving forward here. Alright everyone, you can see we got it installed. This is the drive gear. I was calling it the drive shaft earlier, but drive gear. Why don't you take a look inside here. So just pay attention to how these are lined up. I know that bearing is in far enough because if you look down in there, it's probably hard to tell in the video. Let's see if I can show you a little bit better. You can see that the bearing is seated against the internal retainer ring or snap ring in there. I know I got it in enough. Won't lie, I was getting a little nervous getting this thing in here because it was going in really tough. I mean really tough. They say in the manual, tap on the end of the shaft. If I did that, the shaft would go, but the bearing would not. So I had to, what I used at first was a 2x4 while it was sticking out and a rubber hammer and pounded around it. And then once it got flush, I ended up taking a brass punch and just kind of slowly going round and round and eventually moved right in there. So now we'll get this snap ring here in place and start getting the gears on the outside. Well, sadly, an hour later, I got this back on. Now, when I had to take this gear off, I had to put heat to it in order to get it off. And let me tell you, it went on just as tight. The rubber hammer wasn't enough, and finally, I had to keep beating on it with the sledge in order to get it on. Even using this nut, I was afraid of how much pressure it was taking with the wrench, and I don't have this tractor that greatly supported, so I just kept pounding on it, and I thought I would got enough, and then I go to put the nut on, and boy, that doesn't look right. Luckily, I looked back at the old pictures I had when I was taking this apart, and I was able to look at, you know, the nut was close to the end, just inboard a little bit of the thread. So make sure you got that on good and tight. The snap ring that went on the inside, those things are real bare to put in, but I don't know what I did right. Eventually I just got it in. So yeah, we'll just so you guys know, if you need to rethread this like I just had to, it's a 1" 14, so a 1" fine thread. Thankfully my parents got me a nice big tap and die set for Christmas, so I was able to use that on that, because that's a pretty big size, really. So, all right, now we'll get the gears on the outside here, and we'll start working on the shifters if I have time. All right, everyone, you can see I got the shifter forks and their assemblies in here. Sorry I couldn't show you them kind of step by step or anything. I didn't have my phone with me the other day when I was installing these, so I'll just have to talk through them. Looking at the right side of the tractor, you can see where the shafts come in and out. 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're installing, you start with the front, work your way back, vice versa. If you're taking them out, start with the back, work your way forward. For installing, you will start to install the shaft on this side, position the fork assembly in here, and draw the shaft through it. In each one of these three here, you can see the pawls here, here, and here. Here's an example of one. Here's one that I changed out, and you can see why. It's supposed to be nice and rounded, and it did not look good. I think that was from the gear that it was sitting in for how many years against that shaft. And in the tops of each of these, I know I won't be able to show it with this phone camera, they have a little hole. So when you have it sort of out of gear, you can put a wire through that hole, which holds the pawls up, so that when you're taking the shafts out, they don't drop down, and when you go and reinstall the shafts, those pawls aren't sitting down in the way. They're held in the upward position. I will throw out the note that if you're taking these apart, I would just go ahead and take the pawls out in the springs, because you'll never know what you find. Mine were so full of crud and crap in there that the springs were kind of stuck. But once I cleaned them up, they had some nice spring back to them, popping them back into gear things. But yeah, when you go to install them, though, there's a hole in the bottom, obviously, because they come out. You press it, get this to come up, put some sort of wire through here, and then the shaft will pass through nice and easy. This back one I will also mention has a set screw that goes against a detent in that back shaft, and you lock wire that together. All of this, I mean, is very well described in the John Deere manuals, so I highly recommend that. And as you can see, there is I wouldn't call it a set screw, but this bolt adjusts the play or lack thereof. It becomes a hard stop for the one shaft. Coming around to the other side. So we got this installed. They have inserts in each of these, and you can turn the inserts to adjust where the shaft is in the case, and ultimately the shaft position determines where the detents are that they click into place on the shaft, that the pawls do. And then that in turn determines your gear engagement when you're in gear. I'll be honest, I did not mess with that. I didn't really see the need. I wasn't really switching parts or anything like that, so I assume it's still from the factory. It's still good. They seem to be pretty rusted in there too. Didn't want to jeopardize any of that. So you can see I got the outer gears on here and the forks. So yeah, that's all I really have right now. I'm working on getting the motor cylinder block installed. I'll talk more about this later, but to give you a preview, I went and I painted this area. I got to clean up where the gaskets go and things, but this part was not painted from the factory. However, I figured I had it apart, might as well paint it. Because had some good discussion on Facebook talking about what stage the tractors were painted at. So when I took this apart, the frame rails were already on the tractor when it was painted, so this was just bare metal. But so I shot it with spray paint, and yeah, we'll clean some of this up, but hopefully get all that installed shortly, so you guys should see that in the next video. So got any questions or comments? I'd love to hear them.